Maid's daughter aided an elder daily. Officers arrived with a formal salute. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. In a quiet, upper-class neighborhood, nestled among towering homes and pristine gardens, lived a man named Edward Mallory. One afternoon, as Lily was preparing to leave after another of her visits, something unexpected happened. A black car pulled into the driveway. Two officers, dressed in formal uniforms, stepped out. They looked around, their eyes scanning the house, then turned their attention to Lily. They approached her and paused. For a moment, everything stood still. Lily stood there, her small figure holding a bag of groceries for Edward. The officers walked toward her and, in a gesture that left her speechless, saluted her. The salute was formal, respectful, and full of gratitude. It was a moment that seemed to freeze time. These officers weren't just anyone. They were there to honor Lily. Unknown to her, Edward had been watching from his window the entire time. He had been so moved by her kindness, by the way she had selflessly helped him day after day, that he had reached out to the local police department. He had arranged for this moment, a tribute to the young girl who had changed his life. The officers didn't just salute her out of respect for her actions. They saluted her because they understood the power of her kindness. It was a small act, but to Edward, it was nothing short of extraordinary. He had spent years in a world where acts of kindness were few and far between, but here was this young girl, giving without asking for anything in return. It was a gesture that spoke volumes about her character, and it was a gesture that would never be forgotten. Lily stood there, overwhelmed, as the officers turned and walked away, leaving her with the knowledge that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could leave the biggest impact on the world. It was a day she would never forget, a moment of recognition for something as simple as offering her time to help another human being. Edward, from his window, watched it all unfold, a small tear escaping his eye. It wasn't just the officers who saw Lily's worth. The world, in its own way, had begun to take notice. As the days passed, Lily continued to visit Edward, each day bringing more smiles and shared moments. Her visits became a steady part of Edward's life, a lifeline that he never knew he needed. The officer's salute that day had left a deep mark on her. It wasn't about the gesture itself, but the recognition that her simple acts of kindness could mean so much to someone. She had been raised to believe that kindness didn't need applause, but that day, it felt different. Edward's appreciation was one thing, but this unexpected honor had made her see her actions in a new light. Little did Lily know, her life was about to take an unexpected turn. The following week, Lily arrived at Edward's house, as usual, bringing him his favorite breakfast, pancakes with syrup and a side of fresh fruit. She had gotten into the habit of making him laugh with her silly jokes, even though he rarely smiled. Today, however, there was something different about the house. It was quiet, almost too quiet. She knocked on the door several times before she stepped inside. The house was empty, save for the faint scent of pancakes that still lingered in the kitchen. It was then that she heard the faint sound of a phone ringing in the other room. She rushed toward it, thinking Edward had perhaps forgotten to answer it. But when she picked up the phone, there was no voice at the other end. A moment later, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, startled, to find one of the officers who had saluted her standing in the doorway. He gave her a gentle smile, but it wasn't the usual warm expression she had grown accustomed to. "Lily," he said softly, "I need to talk to you about something important." Lily's heart raced as the officer approached her. She had never seen him so serious, and his words made her uneasy. "Edward, he's in the hospital. He had a stroke this morning." The officer continued, his voice steady but tinged with concern. Lily's heart sank. Edward had always been so strong, so full of life. The thought of him in a hospital bed, unable to speak or move, was almost unbearable. The officer explained that they had found Edward unconscious in his home, and that it was clear that Lily's visits had meant more to him than anyone had realized. Edward had apparently asked for her by name just before he lost consciousness. "We're taking you to the hospital now. He's asking for you," the officer said. As they made their way to the hospital, Lily's mind raced. She couldn't help but feel a deep sense of guilt. Had she been there enough for him? Had she done enough to show him how much she cared? When they arrived at the hospital, Lily was led to Edward's room. His face was pale, his body still. It was hard to see him like this, but the moment she walked in, his eyes fluttered open. A faint smile tugged at his lips as he looked at her. "Lily," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You came." Tears welled up in her eyes as she sat by his side, taking his hand in hers. "I'm here, Edward. I'm always here," she said softly. In that moment, Lily realized that what they shared was more than just simple companionship. It was a bond, a connection that had been built on kindness, respect, and a deep sense of empathy. Edward had given her so much more than she could have ever imagined, and now it was her turn to give back. The officers, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, watched the scene with silent approval. They had seen many things in their careers, but this was different. This was the power of human connection, the kind of bond that went beyond status, wealth, or power. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most profound moments in life came from the simplest acts of kindness. And as Lily sat by Edward's side, knowing he wasn't alone anymore, she realized that her journey was only beginning. Lily sat by Edward's side in the hospital room, her hand gently holding his, the steady beep of the heart monitor the only sound in the quiet room. It had been a long, emotional day, and she was exhausted, but her heart was full. Edward had survived the stroke, but his recovery was uncertain. The doctors had told her it would be a long road ahead, and there was no guarantee he would fully recover. Still, Lily remained hopeful. She had seen him fight through much worse, and she wasn't about to give up on him now. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, doctors, and long hours spent by Edward's side. Lily continued to bring him the comfort he had given her so many times, small acts of kindness, words of encouragement, and a promise that she would never leave him. But as the days passed, Lily began to notice something else. Edward's family, the people who should have been there to support him, were nowhere to be found. He had 2 grown children, both successful in their careers, but neither had bothered to visit him. No phone calls, no messages, nothing. Lily couldn't understand it. How could they abandon him when he needed them the most? It was a harsh reality that she wasn't used to. Edward had spent so much of his life serving his country, sacrificing for his family, and yet now, in his time of need, he was left alone. It made her angry, but as much as she wanted to confront them, she knew it wouldn't help. Instead, she focused on what she could do. She continued to care for Edward, to support him, and to remind him that he wasn't alone. Slowly, but surely, his health began to improve. He started to regain strength, though it was a slow process. He couldn't speak much, but when he did, his words were filled with gratitude. "You saved me, Lily," he whispered one day, his voice weak but sincere. "You've been my strength when I had none." Lily smiled, her heart swelling with warmth. She had never expected anything in return. The simple act of caring for him was enough. But hearing his words meant more than she could express. One afternoon, as Lily was sitting beside Edward's bed, there was a knock at the door. She looked up to see one of the officers who had saluted her standing in the doorway, a solemn expression on his face. "Lily," the officer said quietly, "there's someone who wants to see you." Lily was confused. She had no idea who it could be. She had only been in contact with Edward and the hospital staff. But as she followed the officer down the hallway, her heart began to race. When they arrived at the waiting area, she was stunned to see 2 people standing there, Edward's children. They looked different than she remembered. Their faces were marked with guilt, and their eyes were filled with regret. "Lily," Edward's son said, his voice shaky, "we owe you an apology. We've been terrible children. We should have been here for Dad, and we weren't. But seeing how you've been there for him, we're ashamed of ourselves." Lily didn't know what to say. She was speechless. It wasn't the apology she had been waiting for, but something deeper, a realization that the family had finally woken up. Edward's daughter stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears. "You've shown us what family is supposed to be," she said softly. "You've given him what we couldn't." For the first time, Lily saw Edward's children as human beings, flawed but capable of change. She nodded, understanding that forgiveness was a long journey, but one worth taking. As the family slowly began to reconnect, Edward's recovery continued. It wasn't easy, but with the love and support of those around him, he started to rebuild his life. The officers, too, continued to watch over him, ensuring that his honor and dignity were never lost. Lily had shown them all what true compassion looked like. In the end, it wasn't just Edward who had been saved. It was his entire family, and even the officers who had witnessed Lily's strength. She had given them all something they hadn't known they needed. The reminder that sometimes, the greatest strength comes from the smallest of gestures. Lily sat in the waiting room, her heart racing as she waited for Edward's family to speak with him. It had been a week since they'd shown up at the hospital, offering their apologies, and Lily had spent the time cautiously observing them as they tried to make amends. Edward's recovery had been slow, but it was clear that the love and support around him were making a difference. For the first time in years, he was surrounded by people who cared. His children, though late to realize their mistakes, had truly started to change. Edward's son, Richard, had taken the time to sit by his father's bedside, talking to him, sharing memories of the past, and promising to make things right. His daughter, Sarah, had become more attentive, often sitting with Edward during meals, helping him with his therapy exercises. It was a slow process, but Lily could see the transformation. It wasn't just Edward's physical recovery that was happening. His family was healing as well. One afternoon, Lily returned to the hospital after school to find a surprise. Edward, despite his frail state, was sitting up in bed, a smile on his face as he waved at her. "Lily," he called out, his voice stronger than it had been. "Come in here. I have something to show you." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She had been so focused on his recovery, she hadn't expected this. As she entered the room, she noticed a small envelope on the table beside him. "What's this?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Edward motioned for her to sit down beside him. "I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for me, Lily. You've given me more than I could ever repay." With shaky hands, he picked up the envelope and handed it to her. "Open it," he urged. Lily carefully tore the envelope open, her hands trembling as she pulled out a letter and a small certificate. The letter was short, but it was powerful. It read, "To Lily, for your unwavering kindness, dedication, and heart, we present you with a certificate of honor. You have demonstrated the true meaning of family, friendship, and compassion. You are a beacon of light to all who know you. Thank you for saving us all." Lily stared at the certificate in disbelief. It wasn't just a thank you. It was an acknowledgement of the impact she had made, not just in Edward's life, but in the lives of everyone around him. She felt her eyes well up with tears. She had never expected anything in return for her kindness. She had simply done what she thought was right. "Edward, I didn't do this for recognition," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted to help. You were there for me when I needed it, and I wanted to return the favor." Edward smiled, his eyes gleaming with pride. "You've done more than help, Lily. You've reminded us all of what's truly important." The room fell silent as Lily held the certificate in her hands. She had never imagined that her small acts of kindness could have such a profound effect on someone's life. And now, here she was, being recognized for it. It wasn't about the certificate or the praise. It was about the connection they had built, the bond they had formed. It was about showing love, care, and empathy without expecting anything in return. Later that day, Lily received a visit from one of the officers who had saluted her a few days earlier. He stood at the doorway with a respectful nod, holding a small box. "This is for you, Lily," he said, handing her the box. Inside there was a medal, a symbol of honor, not just for her actions toward Edward, but for the way she had inspired those around her. She wasn't just a young girl from a humble background anymore. She was someone who had taught others the power of love, kindness, and selflessness. As Lily walked out of the hospital that day, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had done something meaningful, something that had touched lives and changed hearts. And though she didn't expect recognition, it had come in ways she could never have imagined. Her journey, from being a quiet girl helping an elderly man, had turned into a story of transformation for herself and for the people she had touched. In that moment, Lily understood that the true reward wasn't the certificate, the medal, or the applause. It was the realization that love and kindness could truly change the world, one small act at a time. Lily's life had changed dramatically in the weeks since Edward's recovery began. It wasn't just about the hospital visits anymore, though she still made sure to spend as much time with him as possible. There was a deeper connection now, something she hadn't expected when she first started helping him. Edward's family, particularly Richard and Sarah, had come to visit him regularly. They were more involved, more present, and the guilt that had once clouded their faces seemed to slowly disappear with each visit. But Lily knew that their journey wasn't over. There was still work to be done. Edward had made incredible progress physically, but emotionally, the healing was just beginning. For years, he had buried his feelings, keeping his emotions locked away, and Lily could tell that it was time to help him confront them. One afternoon, as she sat by Edward's bedside, she decided it was time to have a heart-to-heart. She had noticed how he often gazed out the window, his eyes lost in the memories of his past. "Edward," she said gently, "I know it's not easy, but it's okay to talk about it. You don't have to keep everything inside." Edward looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and gratitude. He had lived a full life, one full of honor, sacrifice, and loss, but he had never truly shared it with anyone. "Lily," he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "I've spent my whole life fighting for others. I thought that if I kept my emotions locked away, I could protect everyone around me. But now, I realize that it's okay to let them out." He paused, as if trying to find the right words. "I never realized how much I was missing until you came into my life. You've shown me what it means to be vulnerable, to allow myself to be cared for. And for that, I'm forever grateful." Lily sat in silence, her heart swelling with pride and a deep sense of fulfillment. She had never expected any of this when she first started helping Edward. She never imagined that she would be the one helping him heal, but that was exactly what had happened. It wasn't just about the acts of kindness anymore. It was about a mutual exchange of healing, growth, and understanding. As Edward's recovery progressed, he began to reconnect with the people who had once been a part of his life. His old friends, some of whom he hadn't spoken to in years, began to reach out. They called him, visited him, and began to rebuild the relationships that had once been so important to him. It was as if the floodgates had opened, and all the emotions that had been locked away for so long were finally coming to the surface. One evening, as Lily and Edward sat on the porch, watching the sunset, he turned to her and said, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about family, about connection. I realize now that I was too proud, too stubborn to see what was in front of me." He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that Lily hadn't seen before. "Thank you, Lily. You've not only saved my life, but you've also taught me how to live it again." Those words meant more to Lily than anything else. She had never expected to change someone's life in such a profound way. But here she was, being thanked by someone who had once been a stranger, someone who had become more like family to her than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't the recognition, the certificate, or the medal that made her feel fulfilled. It was the knowledge that, through small acts of kindness and genuine compassion, she had made a difference in someone's life. And that was all. The reward she needed. In the weeks that followed, Lily and Edward continued to grow closer, building a bond that would last a lifetime. His family remained involved, and the love and care they had once forgotten began to fill the house again. It wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges to face, but they faced them together. Lily had come into Edward's life by chance, but in doing so, she had unknowingly become the catalyst for a transformation that reached far beyond anything she had ever imagined. Lily's life had never been the same since she started helping Edward. In the weeks that followed, things had changed drastically for both of them. She had gone from being a quiet, humble girl to someone who had deeply impacted the life of a man who once seemed untouchable. Edward's health was improving steadily, and more importantly, his emotional well-being was beginning to heal. But there was still something hanging in the air, a sense of incompleteness that lingered even after all the progress. Edward had reconnected with his family, and his bond with them had strengthened, but Lily couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to be done. One evening, as she sat by the window of her small room, she thought back to all the conversations she had had with Edward over the past few months. He had shared stories of his life, his military service, the moments of glory, and the deep regrets. But there was one story that he hadn't told her yet, the one he always avoided. The story of his wife, the love of his life, who had passed away many years ago. Edward's face would always turn somber when Lily asked about her. He never spoke of her, never mentioned her name, and it was clear that the pain of losing her still haunted him. Lily knew she had to be patient. Edward wasn't ready to face that part of his life yet, but she couldn't help feeling that if he could confront it, he would finally be free. One afternoon, she decided to bring it up again, gently. As they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees, she turned to him and said, "Edward, I know there's something you've been holding back. I can see it in your eyes, and I know you're not ready to talk about it yet, but I think you should. For you." Edward looked at her, his eyes filled with sadness. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've kept it all locked away for so long. I don't know if I can ever open that door again." Lily reached out and took his hand in hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to do it all at once. Just start with a little, and we'll go from there." Edward took a deep breath and looked out at the horizon. "Her name was Emily," he said softly. "She was my world. We met when we were both so young, and from that moment, I knew she was the one. She was everything I could have ever asked for. Kind, strong, and full of life. We had a family, a beautiful life together. But when she got sick, I felt helpless. I couldn't save her. And when she died, I lost everything. I didn't know how to move on. I didn't know how to live without her." Tears filled Edward's eyes as he spoke, and Lily's heart broke for him. She knew this was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment where he could finally let go of the past. "It's okay, Edward," she whispered. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore. You're not alone." Edward nodded, his voice trembling. "I've been carrying this weight for so long, Lily. It's been eating away at me, but I never knew how to let it go. I thought if I kept it inside, I could protect everyone, but it's only hurt me more." Lily smiled gently. "Sometimes, letting go is the only way to heal." From that moment on, Edward started to heal in ways he hadn't expected. He continued to rebuild his relationships with his children, and he began to share more of his past, the good and the bad. With Lily's support, he found the strength to confront the ghosts of his past, and, in doing so, he found peace. As the weeks passed, Edward's recovery was nothing short of remarkable. He regained his strength, both physically and emotionally. He started taking short walks in the garden, sitting outside in the sun, and even playing chess with Lily, just like they had done when she first started helping him. But most importantly, he found joy in the small things again. He found joy in the simple acts of kindness, the ones that had once been lost to him. Lily had shown him what it meant to live fully again, and for that, he would always be grateful. The love and compassion she had brought into his life had not only saved him, but had also helped him find the courage to face his past and embrace the future. And as Lily watched him smile, truly smile, for the first time in what felt like forever, she knew that their journey together had only just begun. Lily couldn't believe how much had changed in such a short period of time. Edward's recovery had surpassed everyone's expectations, and the bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day. His family, once distant and cold, was now a regular presence in his life, and the warmth that had been absent for so long finally began to fill the house. One afternoon, Edward called Lily into his study. He had been spending more time there lately, organizing old letters and photographs, as if he was ready to confront more of his past. As she entered, she found him sitting at his desk, holding an old photo album. He looked up at her with a gentle smile, his eyes filled with a deep sense of peace. "Lily," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about how you've been there for me when no one else was. You've shown me more kindness than I thought I deserved." Lily sat beside him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I didn't do it for anything in return, Edward," she said quietly. "I did it because you needed someone, and I knew I could be that someone." Edward nodded, his gaze turning to the photo album. "This is for you," he said, handing it to her. Lily took it hesitantly, unsure of what to expect. As she opened the album, she saw photographs of a much younger Edward, standing tall in his military uniform, his face filled with pride. There were pictures of him and Emily, laughing together on their wedding day, and pictures of their children when they were small. But what caught her eye were the letters tucked between the pages. Edward had kept every letter his wife, Emily, had ever written him, and it was clear that these words had meant everything to him. "I kept them all," Edward explained, his voice trembling slightly. "She was my everything, Lily. And when she was gone, I thought I could never feel that way again." Lily looked at him, her heart breaking for the pain he had carried all these years. "But you're not alone anymore," she said gently. Edward smiled, though there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. "No," he whispered. "I'm not. And I owe it all to you." Over the next few weeks, Edward began to share more of his past with Lily. He spoke of the adventures he had during his military service, the challenges he faced in raising his children, and the love he shared with Emily. It wasn't easy for him to revisit those memories, but he knew that it was time. He had spent so many years locked away in his own grief, but now, with Lily by his side, he could finally begin to heal. His children continued to visit, and their relationship with him grew stronger. Richard, who had once been distant and cold, now made an effort to spend time with his father. He would sit with Edward for hours, listening to his stories and asking questions about his past. Sarah, too, had become more involved, often bringing her children to visit their grandfather. They had all seen the changes in Edward, and they were grateful for the woman who had helped bring him back to life. But even as his family slowly came back together, Edward knew that Lily had played a pivotal role in his recovery. It was because of her that he had found the courage to face his past, and it was because of her that he had learned to love life again. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Edward turned to Lily and said, "You've given me more than I could ever repay. You've given me my life back." Lily smiled, her heart full of emotion. "I'm just glad I could be here for you," she replied softly. And as they sat there, watching the sky turn dark, Lily realized that the true power of kindness wasn't in the big gestures. It was in the small, everyday acts of love and compassion that could change someone's life forever. She had given Edward a chance to live again, and in return, she had learned more about love, forgiveness, and the strength of the human spirit than she ever thought possible. Lily sat quietly on the porch, her eyes fixed on the setting sun. The past few months had been nothing short of transformative, not just for Edward, but for her as well. She had started this journey with the simple intention of helping a lonely, elderly man. But in doing so, she had found herself part of something far bigger, a family, a new understanding of life, and a deep connection that she hadn't expected. Edward's recovery was now complete. He had regained his strength, and although his body bore the scars of his past, his spirit had been rejuvenated. The sadness that had once clouded his eyes was now replaced with a spark of life. He had learned to enjoy the small moments, the little victories, and he had started to take pleasure in things he had long forgotten. His children, Richard and Sarah, were now more than just distant relatives. They were part of his life in a way they hadn't been in years. Richard had begun to visit regularly, taking an active role in his father's life. Sarah, too, had become a constant presence, bringing her children to visit their grandfather. The family, once fractured, was now beginning to heal. But Lily knew that this healing wasn't just about physical recovery or family reconciliation. It was about the emotional growth that had taken place, the willingness to forgive, to let go of past pain, and to move forward with an open heart. One afternoon, as Lily was walking with Edward through the garden, he stopped and looked at her with a smile that was both content and grateful. "You've changed everything, Lily," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "I never thought I could find peace again, but you've shown me what it means to live fully. I'll never be able to thank you enough." Lily smiled back, her heart full. "You don't need to thank me, Edward," she replied. "You've taught me so much, too. About resilience, about strength, and about the power of compassion. I'm just glad I could be here for you." Edward nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You've taught me something I never knew I needed to learn. That it's okay to lean on others. It's okay to let people in. I spent so many years thinking I had to do everything on my own. But now I see that the greatest strength lies in allowing others to help." Lily felt a lump in her throat. She had never imagined that her small acts of kindness would lead to such profound changes in a person's life. When she first started visiting Edward, she had been doing it for him. But along the way, she had learned so much about herself. She had learned the importance of patience, of understanding, and of giving without expecting anything in return. As they walked back to the house, Edward turned to her once more. "Lily," he said, his voice quiet but sincere, "I want you to know that you will always be part of this family. You've done more than just help me. You've brought this family back together. And for that, we'll always be grateful." Lily didn't know what to say. She had never expected such recognition, but it was more than that. It was the realization that she had become part of something that went beyond helping one person. She had helped an entire family find their way back to each other. That was a gift in itself. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to normal. Edward continued to regain his strength, and the family spent more time together. Lily remained a constant presence, not just as a caregiver, but as someone who had become an integral part of their lives. She no longer saw herself as just the maid's daughter. She had become a daughter, a sister, and a friend. And as she watched Edward and his family grow closer, she realized that the love and kindness she had shown had not only healed him, but had healed all of them. It was a reminder that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness could have the biggest impact. And in that moment, Lily understood the true power of love and connection. Lily stood at the edge of the garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. It had been months since Edward had come home from the hospital, and the transformation in his life had been nothing short of miraculous. His strength had returned, and he had found a renewed purpose. But more than that, he had rediscovered the importance of family, of connection, and of the simple moments. That made life worth living. His relationship with his children had blossomed in ways Lily had never imagined. Richard, who had once been distant and focused on his career, now made a point to visit his father regularly. He spent weekends with Edward, reminiscing about old times and sharing stories of his own family. Sarah, too, had become more involved, bringing her children to see their grandfather, allowing Edward to share his wisdom with the younger generation. It was a far cry from the estranged family dynamic they had once had. In the midst of all this change, Lily had found herself woven into the fabric of their lives. She wasn't just the housekeeper's daughter anymore. She was a trusted friend, a confidant, and a true member of the family. She had never expected to be in this position, but the love and gratitude they showed her made every moment worth it. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Edward turned to Lily and smiled. His health had improved so much that he was now able to sit at the table with his family, sharing meals and conversations just like old times. "Lily," he said, raising his glass, "I can never thank you enough for everything you've done. You've not only helped me heal, but you've brought my family back together." Lily's heart swelled with emotion, but she simply smiled and nodded. "I didn't do it for thanks," she replied softly. "I did it because I wanted to help. You've taught me more about love and strength than I could have ever learned anywhere else." As the meal continued, there was a sense of peace in the air, a calm that hadn't been present before. The laughter and conversation flowed freely, a stark contrast to the silence that had once hung over Edward's house. The transformation had been so profound that it was hard to believe how far they had come. But Lily knew that it wasn't just about the changes in Edward's health or his family's newfound connection. It was about the love and kindness that had brought them all together. That was the true gift. Later that night, as Lily sat alone in her room, she thought about everything that had happened. She had come into Edward's life as a stranger, a young girl with a desire to help. But she had found so much more than that. She had found a family, a purpose, and a deep sense of fulfillment. The simple acts of kindness she had offered had changed everything. And in doing so, she had discovered that the smallest gestures could have the biggest impact. The next morning, as she walked outside to tend to the garden, she was greeted by Edward, who was now fully recovered. His health had returned, and his spirit had been restored. He stood there, smiling at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Lily," he said, his voice strong and steady, "thank you. You saved me in more ways than you know." Lily smiled back, her heart full. "I didn't save you, Edward," she replied. "You saved yourself. I just helped you find your way." And in that moment, as they stood together in the garden, Lily realized that this journey had never been just about helping Edward. It had been about helping each other. It had been about the power of compassion, the strength of human connection, and the healing that comes from giving without expecting anything in return. Lily had learned that the most meaningful moments in life were often the ones that were the quietest, the simplest, and the most sincere. And she would carry that lesson with her for the rest of her life.